The lights above the arena were bright and harsh. They burned down on the sand-covered floor like artificial suns. The sand was not truly sand. It was crushed bone, ground down over centuries of death and violence. This was the entertainment center of the Vethkai Empire, and it had seen thousands of species die for the amusement of its masters. Commander Kyle Bennett stood alone in the center of this killing ground. His combat suit had been taken from him. His weapons were gone. His communication device had been destroyed in front of his eyes. All he wore now were the torn remains of his uniform pants and a sleeveless undershirt that was already stained with his own blood from the beatings he had received. Around him, rising up in circular rows that seemed to stretch toward the ceiling, sat thousands of Vethkai. They were insectoid creatures, each one standing nearly 7 feet tall, with hard black shells covering their bodies. Their eyes were compound, made of hundreds of tiny lenses that reflected the arena lights like dark jewels. Their mouths were surrounded by sharp mandibles that clicked together constantly, creating a sound like 1,000 knives being sharpened at once. The clicking grew louder as Kyle raised his head and looked around. He was studying the arena, measuring distances, looking for anything he could use. There was nothing. Just bone dust and high walls and the hungry eyes of his captors. 3 weeks ago, Kyle had been commander of the survey vessel Distant Shore. It was a small ship with a crew of 32 humans. They had been mapping an unexplored region of space when the Vethkai had found them. The battle lasted less than 4 minutes. Human weapons could not penetrate Vethkai shields. Human armor could not stop Vethkai plasma cutters. Now his crew sat in cells somewhere in this massive station, waiting to learn their fate. Kyle had been separated from them on the first day. The Vethkai had recognized him as the leader, and leaders received special treatment. Special treatment meant the arena dot high above the killing floor. In a private observation deck reserved for important visitors, Ambassador Zintara of the Silith Consortium watched the human with growing curiosity. She was not like the Vethkai. Her people were small and delicate, with pale blue skin that was almost translucent. She had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on her face, and each eye glowed with soft silver light. Her body was thin and fragile, built for thinking rather than fighting. The Silith had survived for 12,000 years by never fighting anyone. They were diplomats, traders, and scholars. When stronger species came to conquer them, they submitted. They paid tribute. They made themselves useful. It was not a proud way to live, but it was a way to live. Zintara had been assigned to this station as a diplomatic observer. Her job was to watch, to learn, and to report back to her people about Vethkai military movements. She had seen many executions in this arena. She had watched dozens of species die for Vethkai entertainment. She had never seen anything like this human. "He has no natural weapons," her aide whispered beside her. The aide was also Silith, a young male named Kethrol, who had been with her for only 2 years. "No claws, no venom, no armor. His skin is so soft. This will be over quickly." Zintara did not respond. She was remembering the intelligence reports she had read about humanity. Her people collected information the way the Vethkai collected slaves. The reports on humans had been strange and contradictory. They described a species that had no natural advantages, yet had somehow become the dominant life form on their home planet. A species that had nearly destroyed itself multiple times, yet kept surviving. A species that other galactic powers had started to watch with nervous attention. The arena gates began to open. The sound was like thunder rolling across the bone dust floor. Kyle turned to face the darkness beyond the gates, and Zintara saw something that made her lean forward in her seat. He was smiling. The creature that emerged from the darkness was called a Krethana. It was a beast bred for one purpose: killing. It stood 12 feet tall at the shoulder, supported by 8 massive legs that ended in claws capable of tearing through steel. Its body was covered in armored plates that overlapped like the scales of some nightmare fish. Its head was a horror of eyes and teeth, with jaws that could bite through starship hull plating. The Krethener saw Kyle and roared. The sound shook the arena. Bone dust rose from the floor in small clouds. The Vethkai spectators clicked their mandibles faster, excited by the promise of blood. Kyle did not run. He did not scream. He did not fall to his knees and beg for mercy, as so many others had done before him. He raised his fists. Zintara felt her hearts begin to beat faster. The Silith had two hearts, and both of them were now pounding against her ribs. She did not understand what she was seeing. No rational creature would face a Krethener with bare hands. It was suicide. It was madness. The human began to move. Not backward, as any sensible being would. He moved forward, toward the monster that was about to kill him. His steps were measured and careful. His eyes never left the beast. His fist stayed raised, ready. "What is he doing?" Kethral asked, his voice shaking. Zintara did not answer. She could not answer. She was watching something that her 12,000 years of racial memory said was impossible. She was watching a soft, weak, defenseless creature walk towards certain death with nothing but determination in his eyes. The Krethener charged. The ground shook with each step of its massive legs. Its roar filled the arena again, so loud that some of the Vethkai covered their hearing organs. Its jaws opened wide enough to swallow Kyle whole, and Kyle Bennett, commander of a captured human ship, father of 2 children he might never see again, husband to a woman waiting for him on a planet called Earth, ran straight at Dot in the observation deck. Zintara whispered something in her native language. It was a word that had not been spoken by her people in generations. A word for something they had given up long ago. The word meant hope. That night, Zintara could not sleep. She lay in her quarters and stared at the ceiling, seeing the human's bloody face every time she closed her eyes. The image would not leave her. The way he had looked at the High Executor, the way he had refused to fall even when his body was breaking. Finally, she rose and went to her private terminal. She had access to certain archives that most species on the station could not see. Her people had earned this privilege through centuries of useful submission. The Vethkai trusted the Silith because the Silith never caused trouble. Tonight, Zintara was going to betray that trust. She began searching for information about humans. The official files were brief and dismissive. Humans were classified as a minor species, recently discovered, technologically inferior. Their ships were slow. Their weapons were weak. They were not considered a threat. But there were other files, classified files. Reports from Vethkai scouts who had observed human space from a distance. Analysis from military intelligence. Warnings from commanders who had encountered human ships in battle. These files told a very different story. Zintara read about human history. She learned that humans had spent most of their existence fighting each other. They had developed weapons capable of destroying their entire planet, not once but many times over. They had pointed these weapons at themselves and lived for decades under the threat of total destruction, and they had not used them. They had chosen not to destroy themselves. They had pulled back from the edge. She read about human biology. They were soft, yes. They were slow compared to many species. But they could survive injuries that would kill almost any other creature. They could lose limbs and keep fighting. They could function with damage that would shut down other species completely. Their bodies were designed to take punishment and keep going. She read about something called adrenaline, a chemical their bodies produced under stress. It made them stronger and faster and less sensitive to pain. In moments of crisis, humans could perform physical feats that seemed impossible for their biology. She read about their social bonds. Humans formed deep connections with each other. They would risk their lives for family, for friends, for complete strangers. They had a concept called "no one left behind" that drove their military operations. A human soldier would walk into certain death to recover the body of a fallen companion. The Vethkai could not understand this. Neither could most species. Why waste resources on the dead? Why risk the living for those who could not be saved? But humans did it anyway. Every time. Without question, Zintar sat back from her terminal and tried to process what she had learned. She had thought the human in the arena was special, unusual, perhaps defective in some way that made him more aggressive than his species normally was. She was wrong. Kyle Bennett was not unusual. He was typical. Every human was like this. An entire species of creatures who refused to surrender, refused to accept defeat, refused to stop fighting even when all hope was gone. No wonder the Vethkai had classified them as a potential future threat. No wonder the military intelligence reports recommended avoiding human space until better weapons could be developed. A species like this could not be conquered. They could be killed, yes, but they would never stop resisting. They would fight with ships and weapons. When those were gone, they would fight with knives and rocks. When those were gone, they would fight with their bare hands. And even when they died, their example would inspire others to keep fighting. Zintara made a decision. She was an old woman by her species standards. She had lived for 3 centuries, always careful, always cautious, always surviving. She had watched other species suffer under Vethkai rule and done nothing because nothing could be done. But now she had seen something new, a possibility she had never considered. If a single human could face impossible odds and refuse to break, what might happen if others learned from his example? She opened a new channel on her terminal. This one was private, encrypted, hidden from Vethkai surveillance. The Silith had built these secret channels over centuries of quiet rebellion. They used them to share information, to warn each other of dangers, to maintain some small sense of identity under the boots of their masters. Tonight, Zintara would use them for something more. She composed a message and sent it to her contacts among the Morthine traders. The Morthine were 4-armed beings with gray skin and sad eyes. They had been conquered by the Vethkai 2,000 years ago. Their ships now carried Vethkai goods across the galaxy, and their people served as merchants in Vethkai markets. The message said, "Did you see what the human did today in the arena?" She sent another message to the Pellet engineers. The Pellet were small, quick creatures with nimble fingers and brilliant minds. The Vethkai used them to maintain their ships and stations because Pellet engineering skills were the best in the known galaxy. The message said, "They say he killed a Krethner with his bare hands." She sent messages to the Hoshkwi laborers, the Venti scholars, the Krum musicians. She sent messages to every subjugated species on the station. The messages said, "They say his crewmates are still alive in the holding cells. They say he is not going to leave without them. They say humans never abandon their people." By morning, the whispers had spread to every corner of the station. In the dining halls where slaves ate their meager meals, creatures bent their heads together and talked about the human who would not break. In the maintenance tunnels where workers spent their days in darkness, stories passed from hand to hand like precious secrets. And in his cell, Kyle Bennett sat alone, not knowing that his fight had started something much larger than his own survival. Not knowing that an old Silith ambassador was risking everything her people had, built because she had seen hope in a pair of human eyes. The whispers grew louder every hour. And somewhere in the darkness, the Vethkai began to feel afraid. The Krethner was fast. For something so large, it moved with terrible speed. Its 8 legs drove it forward like a living tank, and its jaws snapped shut on the space where Kyle had been standing. But Kyle was no longer there. At the last possible moment, he had dropped into a slide. The bone dust on the arena floor helped him move, and he slid beneath the creature's massive head between its front legs and came up running on the other side. Before the Krethner could turn, Kyle jumped onto its back leg and drove his elbow into the soft tissue behind its primary eye cluster. The beast screamed. It was a sound of pain, not rage. No one had ever heard a Krethner in this arena before. The creatures were supposed to be unstoppable. They were supposed to be the final act, the guaranteed death that ended every show. In the observation deck, Zintara was standing now. She did not remember rising from her seat. Her 4 eyes were wide, and the silver glow in them had grown brighter. Beside her, Kethril was making small sounds of disbelief. "How is he doing this?" the young aide asked. "I do not know," Zintara admitted. But she was beginning to understand. The human was not stronger than the beast. He was not faster. He was not tougher. But he was thinking. Every move he made was calculated. Every attack was aimed at a specific weakness. The soft tissue behind the eyes. The gaps between the armor plates. The joints where the legs connected to the body. The human was fighting with his brain as much as his fists. The Krethner recovered from its surprise and spun around. One of its massive legs sweeping through the air where Kyle had been standing. Kyle ducked under it and rolled, coming up near the creature's back legs. He grabbed onto one of the armor plates and began to climb. The beast thrashed wildly. It bucked and twisted, trying to throw the tiny creature off its back. Kyle held on with one hand and used the other to strike at every vulnerable spot he could reach. His knuckles were bleeding now. The armor plates were sharp, and each grip cost him skin and blood. But he did not let go. In the stands, the clicking of the Vethkai mandibles had changed. It was no longer the excited sound of anticipation. It was confusion, uncertainty. They had never seen a prey creature fight back like this. They had never seen a soft-skinned being hold its own against a Krethnar. The beast slammed its body against the arena wall, trying to crush Kyle between itself and the stone. Kyle jumped clear at the last moment, hitting the ground hard and rolling to absorb the impact. He was up again immediately, blood running from a cut on his forehead. His left arm hanging at an angle that suggested something was broken or dislocated. He raised his fists again. The Krethna turned to face him. It was breathing heavily now. Its attacks were slower, less coordinated. Kyle had done real damage. Not enough to kill it, but enough to hurt it. Enough to tire it. "Persistence predator," Zintara whispered. She remembered the phrase from the intelligence reports. It described a hunting strategy that humans had evolved on their home planet. They did not need to be faster than their prey. They did not need to be stronger. They simply needed to keep going. Keep attacking. Keep pursuing. Eventually, their prey would tire, and then they would strike. Kyle was doing the same thing now. Every attack cost him blood and pain, but every attack also cost the Krethner energy. The beast was massive, and massive things grew tired quickly. Kyle was smaller, lighter. It could keep moving longer. The fight continued for 7 minutes. 7 minutes of blood and violence that the arena had never seen before. Kyle was thrown against walls. He was bitten, the beast's smaller teeth leaving deep gashes in his legs. He was stepped on, trampled, nearly crushed, but he never stopped moving. Finally, Kyle found what he was looking for. The Krethner lowered its head for another bite, and Kyle leaped onto its neck. His hands found the gap between armor plates that protected its throat. He wrapped his arms around the beast's neck and began to squeeze. The Krethner went wild. It thrashed and bucked and roared. It slammed Kyle against the ground, against the walls, against everything it could find. Kyle's ribs cracked. His vision went black at the edges. Blood filled his mouth. He did not let go. The beast's movements grew slower. Its roars became weaker. It stumbled, then fell to its knees. Kyle squeezed tighter, using every ounce of strength left in his broken body. The Krethna collapsed. The arena went silent. The clicking stopped. Thousands of Vethkai stared down at the impossible sight below them. A human, covered in blood and barely able to stand, had defeated their ultimate weapon. Kyle rose to his feet. It took him 3 tries. His legs shook. His arms hung at his sides. He was broken and bleeding from more wounds than Zintara could count, but he was alive. He looked up at the observation deck where the Vethkai High Executor sat. The High Executor was the largest Vethkai on the station, his shell marked with gold patterns that showed his rank. Kyle stared directly at him. He did not speak. He did not need to. His eyes said everything. They said, "I am still here." They said, "Is that all you have?" They said, "I am human, and we do not break dot in her observation deck." Zintara felt tears running from her 4 eyes. She did not know why she was crying. Her people had not cried in generations. There had been nothing worth crying about, but now there was. Now there was something worth feeling. A small, soft, broken creature had stood against the impossible and refused to fall. For the first time in 12,000 years, Zintara wondered what it would feel like to fight back. The Vethkai High Executor was not a fool. He had ruled this station for 40 years, and he had learned to recognize danger in all its forms. The whispers had reached his ears by the 3rd day. His informants told him that the subjugated species were talking about the human. They were sharing stories. They were asking questions. This was unacceptable. He ordered the human to fight again. And again. And again. 7 times Kyle Bennett entered the arena, and 7 times he emerged alive. He fought Krethner beasts and armed gladiators and mechanical killing machines. He fought with broken bones and torn muscles and blood running into his eyes. He kept winning. Each victory made the whispers louder. Each victory made the subjugated species braver. The High Executor could see it happening, could feel his grip on the station loosening. He had created this problem by putting the human in the arena. He had shown his subjects that the Vethkai were not invincible. He had shown them that a single creature could stand against impossible odds and survive. He decided to end it. The human would be executed publicly, without any chance to fight back. His body would be displayed as a warning to anyone who thought resistance was possible. The execution was scheduled for the following morning. That night, Zintara came to Kyle's cell. She had bribed 6 guards to look away. She had falsified security records to hide her movements. She had risked everything her people had built over 12,000 years of careful diplomacy. One word from any of those guards would mean her death, and the punishment of her entire species. She did not care anymore. Kyle looked up when the cell door opened. His face was a map of bruises and cuts. One of his eyes was swollen shut. His left arm was wrapped in makeshift bandages torn from his shirt. He looked like he should be dead, but his one good eye was alert, watching, measuring, always looking for an opportunity. "You are the Silith ambassador," he said. His voice was rough from dehydration. "I saw you in the observation deck." "Yes." Zintara stepped into the cell. The door closed behind her. "I have been watching you since your first fight. Come to see the animal before they put it down." She shook her head. Her 4 eyes glowed softly in the darkness of the cell. "I came to ask you a question." Kyle waited. "Why do you keep fighting?" Zintara asked. "You cannot win. Every species on this station knows this. The Vethkai are too strong. Their weapons are too powerful. Their numbers are too great. You must understand that your death is certain." Kyle was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, softer, more human. "My crew's in the holding cells on level 7, he said. 32 people, They trusted me to lead them, to keep them safe. I failed them when we got captured. I am not going to fail them again. But what can you do? You are one man. I can keep fighting until I cannot fight anymore. I can make the Vethkai spend resources dealing with me. I can buy my people time. He looked at her with his one good eye. And maybe if I make enough noise, someone will notice. Someone will ask questions. Someone will realize that humans do not give up, no matter what. Zintara felt something shift inside her. It was like a lock opening, a door swinging wide, a wall crumbling to dust. Your crew, she said slowly. They have families waiting for them on your home planet. Most of them. Katie, my pilot, has 3 kids. Her husband takes care of them while she is in space. Derek, my chief engineer, just got married before this mission. His wife does not even know he is missing yet. Kyle's voice cracked slightly. They deserve to go home. They deserve to see their families again. That is worth fighting for, even if you die, especially if I die. Kyle leaned forward. Listen to me, Ambassador. I know I am probably not going to survive this. I have known that since the first day. But if I give up, if I stop fighting, then it was all for nothing. My crew loses hope. The other prisoners lose hope. Everyone on this station learns that resistance is pointless. He held up his battered fists. But if I keep fighting, even when it is hopeless, then maybe someone sees. Maybe someone remembers. Maybe the next time the Vethkai try to break someone, that person thinks about the human who would not break, and they find the strength to keep going. Zintara stared at him. This broken, bleeding creature, locked in a cell waiting for death, was still thinking about how to help others. He was still planning, still hoping, still refusing to accept the inevitable. You humans, she whispered, are terrifying. Kyle laughed. It was a painful sound, rough and wet, but it was genuine. We have been told that before. Zintara made her decision. She had been making it slowly over the past 2 weeks, but now it was final. She reached into her robe and pulled out a small device. This is a master key, she said. It will open any door on this station. I obtained it from a pellet engineer who owes me a favor. She placed it in Kyle's hand. The execution is scheduled for tomorrow morning. The guards will come for you at dawn. Kyle stared at the device. His hand was shaking. The Morthene traders have agreed to disable the security systems in Section 12, Zintara continued. The pellet engineers will open the holding cell doors at the same time. The Hashkri laborers have been gathering improvised weapons for 3 days. She stepped back toward the cell door. Your whispers, Kyle said. This is because of what you have been telling people. Zintara nodded. You showed them something they had forgotten. You showed them what courage looks like. I merely reminded them that they had seen it. She opened the door to leave, then paused. Commander Bennett, she said, my people have survived for 12,000 years by never fighting back. We have preserved our culture and our lives through submission and diplomacy. I thought this was wisdom. I thought this was strength. She looked back at him. I was wrong. You have taught me that there are things worth dying for. I hope I have the courage to remember that lesson. And then she was gone. And Kyle was alone with a key that could open every door on the station. And the knowledge that tomorrow would bring either death or freedom. He did not sleep that night. He sat in the darkness and thought about his crew, his family, his species. He thought about the Silith ambassador and her glowing eyes. He thought about all the subjugated peoples on this station who were preparing to risk everything because they had seen one human refuse to break. When dawn came and the guards arrived for his execution, they found the cell door already open. The uprising had begun. The station descended into chaos. Alarms screamed through every corridor. Emergency lights flashed red and white, casting strange shadows on the walls. The sound of weapons fire echoed from dozens of locations at once. Kyle moved through the confusion like a ghost. The master key opened every door he encountered. The pellet had done their work well. Security systems were down in entire sections of the station. Cameras were blind. Communication channels were jammed. He found his crew on level 7, exactly where Zintara had told him they would be. The holding cells were already open. His 32 people were standing in the corridor, confused and afraid, not understanding what was happening. Katie, his pilot, saw him first. Her face went through shock, relief, and determination in the space of 3 seconds. She was a small woman with short brown hair and eyes that missed nothing. 3 kids were waiting for her back on Earth. "Commander," she said, "what is happening?" "We are leaving," Kyle told her. "All of us, today," he explained quickly. "The uprising, the allied species, the route to the docking bay." His people listened, their fear slowly transforming into something harder and more dangerous. Derek, his chief engineer, stepped forward. He was a tall man with dark skin and clever hands that could fix anything. His wife was back on Earth, probably still checking her messages every hour, hoping for news. "We do not have weapons," Derek said. "We will find some." Kyle looked at his crew, his family, the people who had trusted him with their lives. Stay together. Protect each other. No one gets left behind. They moved out. The corridors of the station had become battlefields. Morphine traders fought with improvised clubs and stolen plasma cutters. Pellet engineers had turned their tools into weapons, using welding torches and power drills against their former masters. Hashkri laborers, large and strong from lives of physical work, wrestled Vethkai guards to the ground with their bare hands. Kyle's crew joined the fight. They grabbed weapons from fallen guards. They helped wounded rebels reach safety. They became part of something larger than themselves, part of a movement that had started with a single human refusing to break. The battle raged for hours. Kyle lost track of time. He lost track of everything except the next enemy, the next door, the next step toward freedom. His body was failing. The wounds from his arena fights had never fully healed, and new injuries were adding to the damage. But he kept moving. He had promised his people he would get them home, and Kyle Bennett kept his promises. They reached the docking bay just as the Vethkai reinforcements arrived. The High Executor himself led them. He was massive, his gold-marked shell gleaming under the emergency lights. Behind him stood his elite guard, the best warriors in the Vethkai military. They blocked the path to the ships with a wall of armored bodies and plasma weapons. Kyle's crew formed up behind him. The other rebels gathered around them. Morthine and Pellet and Hashkri and Soeth, all standing together for the first time in the history of this station. Zintara stepped forward from the crowd. She walked past Kyle and stopped halfway between the rebels and the Vethkai line. The High Executor pointed one chitinous arm at her. His compound eyes glittered with fury. "You," he hissed. The sound was like acid on metal. "The Silith Ambassador. My informants told me about your whispers, your secret messages, your sedition." His mandibles clicked together rapidly. "Your people will suffer for this betrayal. We will burn your home world. We will erase your culture from the galaxy. Your species will become a memory, a warning to others who think of defying us." Zintara stood very still. She was small and fragile, a scholar among warriors, a diplomat among killers. She should have been terrified. She should have been begging for mercy. Instead, she smiled. "My whispers only spread because you gave them something to whisper about," she said. Her voice was calm and clear. "You showed us a human fighting with his bare hands against your monsters. You showed us what courage looks like. You showed us that your power is not absolute, that your warriors can be defeated, that your empire can be challenged." She turned to look at the gathered rebels. You cannot unshow us that. You cannot make us forget what we saw. You can kill us all, every single one of us, and it will not matter. The story of this day will spread. Other stations will hear about it. Other species will learn that resistance is possible. She turned back to the High Executor. You have already lost. You just do not know it yet. Kyle moved to stand beside her. His crew spread out behind him. The other rebels filled in the gaps, forming a united front of species that had never stood together before. Here is the thing about humans, Kyle said. His voice was tired but strong. We are not special. We are soft and slow and fragile. Any species in this room could kill us one-on-one. But we figured something out a long time ago on our little planet. He gestured to the crowd behind him. Nobody is as strong as all of us. When we work together, when we protect each other, when we refuse to give up on each other, we become something more. Something unstoppable. The High Executor looked at the army before him. Humans in Silith and Morthine and Pellet and Hashkree, united by hope and desperation, and the example of one man who would not break. He calculated the odds. His elite guard could probably win this fight. They had better weapons, better armor, better training. But the cost would be enormous. And even if they won here, the damage was done. The whispers had spread too far. The story was already being told on other stations, other planets, other corners of the galaxy. The High Executor ordered the retreat. The docking bay fell silent as the Vethkai withdrew. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Katie let out a shaky laugh, and Derek started to cry, and the rebels began to cheer. They had won. Against all odds, against all logic, against everything the galaxy had taught them about power and submission and survival. They had won. Kyle turned to Zintara. The old Silith ambassador was trembling, her 4 eyes bright with tears. "Thank you," he said, "for everything." She reached out and touched his hand. Her fingers were cool and delicate against his battered skin. "Thank you," she replied, "for showing us what we had forgotten, for reminding us that some things are worth fighting for." 3 years later, Ambassador Zintara stood before the coalition of free species. The assembly hall was filled with representatives from 12 civilizations that had thrown off Vethkai rule. Inspired by the events on that station, Kyle sat in the audience. Wearing the uniform of the Coalition Defense Force, his crew sat beside him. All 32 of them had made it home. All 32 had chosen to return to space, to help build something new, something better. "Today we celebrate our freedom," Zintara said to the assembly. "But we must never forget how we earned it. Not through superior weapons or larger armies. Through something far more powerful." She paused, her 4 eyes sweeping across the gathered delegates. "Through the simple, stubborn belief that every soul is worth fighting for. Through the courage to whisper hope in the darkest places. Through the discovery that when we stand together, we are unstoppable." Her eyes found Kyle. "The humans taught us this. They taught us with bleeding fists and broken bones. They taught us by refusing to accept the impossible. They showed us that the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy is not a warship or a plasma cannon." She smiled. "It is someone who will not stop fighting for the people they love." The assembly hall erupted in applause. Humans in Silith and Morthine and all the rest. Standing together, celebrating together, building a future together. And in that moment, watching the old ambassador speak about hope and courage and love, Kyle Bennett finally understood what his fight in the arena had really been about. It was never about winning. It was never about survival. It was about showing others what was possible. It was about proving that even in the darkest moments, even against impossible odds, there was always a reason to keep fighting, because you never knew who was watching. You never knew whose whisper you might inspire.